The stars had never seemed so bright to the young Threxian diplomat as she stood before the ancient archives. Nina Ross scrolled through data files that had gathered dust for over 300 years, her scaled fingers trembling slightly as she read the warnings left by the previous generation. The text spoke of a species called humanity, of their voluntary withdrawal from galactic affairs, and of solemn promises made to leave their world untouched. The Galactic Council chambers buzzed with the usual morning activity. Delegates from 100 worlds moved through the marble halls, discussing trade agreements and territorial disputes. Nina clutched her data pad tightly as she made her way toward the main assembly room. She had requested an emergency hearing, though she doubted many would take her seriously. At 26 cycles old, she was among the youngest diplomats ever appointed to the council, and many of the elder members still viewed her as little more than an intern. The chamber fell into a lazy sort of attention as Nina approached the speaking platform. Council Chair Morvex, a towering Bronthan with silver-blue skin, gestured for her to begin. Nina took a deep breath and activated the holographic display above her station. "Honored members," she started, her voice steadier than she felt, "I come before you regarding the proposed mining operation on the third planet of the Sol system. We call it Earth." A ripple of mild interest moved through the chamber. The Sol system had been flagged as commercially valuable in recent surveys, particularly the moon orbiting the third planet. Rich deposits of rare minerals had been detected, the kind that could power faster-than-light drives for decades. 300 years ago, Nina continued, the species that originated from that world made a choice. They chose to enter what they called the Great Sleep. They sealed themselves in stasis facilities across their planet and withdrew from all galactic contact. In exchange, the council of that era promised to leave their system untouched. A few delegates shifted in their seats. Most looked bored. One was openly checking messages on his communication device. Trevor Kane stood near the back of the chamber, a human-looking figure in an expensive suit. He was not human, of course. Humans had been asleep for 3 centuries. Kane was a Zelthran, a species known for their ability to mimic other forms. He had chosen this appearance for his business dealings, finding that the human form projected a certain aggressive confidence that served him well in negotiations. Kane had built his fortune on mining operations across the outer territories. His company, Kane Extraction Industries, employed thousands and had made him one of the wealthiest beings in the known galaxy. The Sol system represented his biggest opportunity yet. The mineral deposits on Earth's moon were worth billions, perhaps trillions of credits. "The treaties you mention are outdated," Kane called out, not bothering to wait for formal recognition to speak. 300 years is a long time, young diplomat. Governments change. Priorities shift. The current council is not bound by the promises of our ancestors. Several delegates nodded in agreement. Nina felt her confidence wavering but pressed on. "The warnings in the archives suggest that humanity chose sleep for a specific reason," she said. "They were concerned about their own nature. About their capacity for conflict. The records indicate they had become too efficient at warfare, too dangerous to themselves and potentially to others. They chose isolation to protect everyone, including themselves." "Fairy tales," Kane interrupted with a dismissive wave. "Ghost stories to scare children. I have studied this species extensively. Their technology at the time of their sleep was primitive compared to ours. They had barely achieved reliable space travel. They were a young species that overestimated their own importance." Council Chair Morvex tapped his gavel on the desk. "Mr. Kane, please allow the delegate to finish." But the damage was done. Nina could see it in the faces around the chamber. They agreed with Kane. 300 years was indeed a long time. The galaxy had changed. New species had joined the council. Old alliances had shifted. Treaties from 3 centuries ago seemed as relevant as ancient history. Nina tried a different approach. "Even if we disregard the warnings, there is a practical concern. The mining operations will cause seismic disturbances. Earth's moon is close to the planet. Drilling could trigger earthquakes or worse. We could accidentally wake them." "And if we do?" Kane asked with a shrug. "They wake up to a galaxy that has moved on without them. They will adapt or they will return to sleep. Either way, it is not the council's concern." The vote was called. Nina watched helplessly as delegate after delegate approved Kane's mining proposal. The final tally was overwhelming, 83 in favor, 12 against, 5 abstentions. The motion passed easily. Kane smiled as he left the chamber. He had his permits. He had his approvals. Within 2 weeks, his ships would begin operations in the Sol system. Nina returned to her small office and collapsed into her chair. She had failed. She pulled up the archive files again, reading through the warnings one more time. One passage caught her attention, a quote from the last human ambassador before the Great Sleep began. "We have discovered something troubling about our species," the ambassador had written. "We are very good at patterns. Too good. We see connections where others see chaos. We adapt faster than any species we have encountered. In peace, this makes us excellent scientists and artists. In war, it makes us terrifying. We have decided to remove ourselves before we become what we fear." Nina stared at the words for a long time. Then she filed an official protest with the council, knowing it would be ignored, and began preparing for what might come next. 6 weeks later, Kane's fleet arrived in the Sol system. 12 massive mining ships took up positions around Earth's moon. The planet below looked peaceful from orbit, its blue oceans and white clouds creating swirling patterns across the surface. Long-range scans detected no activity from the surface. No transmissions, no heat signatures beyond natural processes, no signs of civilization at all. Kane stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the moon grow larger on the view screen. "Begin drilling operations," he ordered. The first drills punched into the lunar surface with tremendous force. Massive boring machines, each the size of a building, started chewing through rock and soil. The vibrations were immediate and stronger than expected. Instruments on the mining ships detected unusual resonance patterns, as if the moon itself was conducting the vibrations in unexpected ways. On Earth below, in a facility buried deep beneath the ancient mountains of Colorado, warning lights began to flash for the first time in 300 years. Seismic sensors detected the drilling. Emergency protocols activated. And in rows upon rows of stasis chambers, monitoring systems began their wake-up sequences. The Great Sleep was coming to an end. The first warning broadcast on frequencies that had been silent for 300 years. It pulsed outward from Earth in concentric waves, reaching Kane's mining fleet in less than 2 seconds. The message was simple and repeated in 847 different languages, cycling through each one methodically. "Attention, unidentified vessels. You are in violation of protected space. Cease all extraction operations immediately. This is your only warning." On the bridge of Kane's flagship, the communications officer looked up from his console with confusion. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the planet's surface." Kane frowned. "That's impossible. Our scans showed no active technology down there." "I know, sir, but the signal is strong. Very strong. And it's repeating in multiple languages." The officer played the message through the bridge speakers. Kane listened for a moment, then waved his hand dismissively. "It's an automated system. Ancient programming triggered by our drilling. Ignore it and continue operations." The mining crews returned to their work. The drills dug deeper into the lunar soil, their powerful mechanisms sending vibrations through the rock. The tremors traveled down through the moon's core and radiated outward, reaching across the narrow gap of space to Earth's surface. Deep beneath what had once been called Colorado, buried under layers of rock and reinforced shielding, the mountain research facility had remained unchanged for 3 centuries. Row upon row of stasis pods lined the walls of massive chambers carved into the mountain itself. 50,000 people slept here, their bodies preserved in perfect suspension, their minds dreaming in virtual spaces designed to keep them occupied during the long sleep. The seismic sensors detected the vibrations first. They measured the frequency, calculated the source, and determined that the disturbance was not natural. Within milliseconds, the facility's central computer began running through emergency protocols that had been programmed 300 years earlier. Priority 1. Wake the emergency response team. In Chamber 7, a stasis pod began its revival sequence. Warming elements activated. Chemical stabilizers started flowing through intravenous lines. Neural stimulators fired in carefully timed patterns. The process that normally took 6 hours was compressed into 20 minutes for emergency situations. Dr. Laura Hayes opened her eyes for the first time in 300 years. The inside of her stasis pod glowed with soft amber light. Her mind felt foggy, thoughts moving through thick syrup. She tried to remember where she was, why she was here. Memories came back in fragments. The decision to sleep. The farewell ceremonies. The promises that they would not be disturbed. A mechanical voice spoke from a speaker near her head. "Emergency wake protocol complete. Dr. Hayes, please exit your pod and proceed to the command center." Laura's fingers fumbled with the release mechanism. The pod lid hissed open and cool air rushed across her face. She sat up slowly, fighting waves of dizziness. Around her, 11 other pods were opening. The other members of the emergency team were waking as well. "What's happening?" someone asked. It was Tom Chin, the facility's security chief. He looked as disoriented as Laura felt. "I don't know yet," Laura said, forcing herself to stand. Her legs felt weak, but the facility's automated systems had kept their muscles from atrophy during the long sleep. "Let's get to command and find out." The command center was a short walk from Chamber 7. The team stumbled down corridors lit by emergency lighting, supporting each other as they went. Laura reached the command center first and pressed her hand against the access panel. The door slid open. The room was filled with screens and displays, most of them dark. The central holographic table was active, showing a three-dimensional representation of Earth and its moon. Red warning icons flashed around the lunar surface. "Computer status report," Laura commanded. The facility's artificial intelligence responded immediately. "Seismic activity detected originating from Luna. Analysis indicates artificial drilling operations in progress. 12 unidentified vessels currently in orbit around Luna. Earth's automated defense grid has issued standard warnings. Warnings have been ignored. Awaiting command authorization for defensive measures." Laura felt her stomach drop. Someone was mining the moon. After 300 years of protected sleep, someone had come to their system and started tearing up their moon. And they had ignored the warnings. Tom Chin joined her at the holographic table. "Can you show us the ships?" The display zoomed in, revealing detailed scans of Kane's mining fleet. The vessels were large and industrial, built for resource extraction rather than combat. But they were there, unauthorized and unwelcome. "Have we tried to communicate with them?" Laura asked. "Automated warnings have been broadcast in 847 languages, the computer replied. "No response has been received." Another team member, Rachel Foster, spoke up from a nearby console. "I'm reading the transmission logs. Our defense grid has been broadcasting for 20 minutes. They're definitely receiving the messages. They're just ignoring us." Laura closed her eyes and took a deep breath. This was the scenario they had hoped to avoid. Humanity had gone to sleep specifically to avoid confrontation, to give the galaxy time to develop without human interference. Now someone had disturbed that sleep, had violated the treaties, and was ignoring all attempts at communication. "What are our defensive options?" she asked. The computer displayed a list on one of the screens. The Earth defense grid consisted of hundreds of satellites and automated platforms left in orbit when humanity entered the Great Sleep. They were designed to be non-lethal but effective, capable of disabling threats without causing casualties. "We need to make them understand we're serious," Tom said. "A demonstration." Laura nodded slowly. "Computer, select one of the mining vessels. Target its propulsion systems only. I want it disabled but intact. No casualties." "Acknowledged." Selecting optimal target. Satellite platform Delta 7 is in position. On the holographic display, one of the mining ships was highlighted in yellow. A small dot representing a defense satellite moved into position above it. "All personnel are showing safe aboard target vessel," the computer reported. "Ready to fire on your command." Laura hesitated. This would be the first hostile action humanity had taken in 300 years. But they had tried to communicate. They had issued warnings. What else could they do? "Fire," she said quietly. High above Earth, a satellite that had drifted silently for 3 centuries suddenly came alive. Its targeting systems locked onto the mining ship with perfect precision. A beam of concentrated energy lanced down from orbit, invisible to the naked eye but devastating in its effect. The beam struck the mining ship's main engine housing for exactly 3 seconds. On Kane's flagship, alarms erupted across every console. The officer at the tactical station shouted in panic. "Sir, one of our mining ships just lost all power. Something hit it from orbit." Kane rushed to the view screen. He could see the disabled ship drifting, its running lights flickering and dying. "Where did the shot come from?" "Orbital platform, sir. We didn't even see it on sensors until it fired." Before Kane could respond, a second ship went dark. Then a third. Each strike was surgical and precise, hitting only the propulsion systems, leaving life support intact. "They're not trying to kill us," the tactical officer said with growing fear in his voice. "They're just showing us they can." Kane stared at the disabled ships. 3 vessels worth millions of credits, knocked out of action in seconds by weapons that his sensors had not even detected. The message was clear. Earth was not as defenseless as he had assumed. Kane watched his 3 disabled mining ships drift helplessly in the darkness of space. His hands gripped the armrests of his command chair so tightly that his knuckles turned white. 300 million credits worth of equipment knocked out in seconds by weapons he had not even known existed. The young diplomat's warnings echoed in his mind, but he pushed them away. He had not built an empire by backing down when challenged. "Contact the security division," Kane ordered. "I want our military contractors here within 24 hours. Full combat deployment." His first officer turned to face him with concern. "Sir, perhaps we should reconsider. Those weapons were clearly advanced. Maybe we should negotiate." "Negotiate?" Kane's voice rose sharply. "With whom? Some automated defense system? No. We have permits from the Galactic Council. We have every legal right to be here. I will not be intimidated by ancient technology." Within 18 hours, Kane's private military fleet arrived in the Sol system. 20 warships, each one bristling with weapons and carrying squadrons of fighter craft. They were not the largest military force in the galaxy, but they were well-trained and well-equipped. Kane had used them before to handle labor disputes and protect his assets in dangerous territories. The military fleet took up positions around Earth, their sensors sweeping the planet and its orbital space. They detected the defense satellites now, hundreds of them positioned in carefully planned patterns around the globe. But the satellites remained silent and inactive. In the Mountain Research Facility, alarms blared through every corridor. Laura Hayes stood at the command center with her small team, watching the tactical display with growing dread. The arrival of military vessels had triggered automatic responses across the entire planetary defense network. "Computer status report," Laura said, her voice tight with tension. 20 hostile vessels detected. Configuration indicates military purpose. Proximity triggers have been activated. Emergency wake protocols are now engaging in all facilities worldwide. Tom Chin looked at her with wide eyes. "All facilities? That's not just us. That's everyone." Laura nodded grimly. There were 237 stasis facilities scattered across Earth's surface. Some held a few thousand people. Others held millions. In total, 8 billion human beings had entered the Great Sleep 300 years ago. Now they were all beginning to wake up. "How long until the first facilities are fully operational?" Laura asked. "Estimated 3 to 6 weeks for full revival of all personnel. However, emergency response teams in each facility are waking now. Approximately 200,000 individuals will be conscious within the next hour." Rachel Foster spoke from her console. "Dr. Hayes, we're receiving communication requests from the military fleet. They're demanding we power down our defense systems and allow them to continue mining operations." "Ignore them," Laura said. "We tried communication before. They did not listen." But she knew that ignoring them would not be enough. Her small team and a few 100,000 emergency responders could not hold off a determined military assault. They needed time. Time for more people to wake. Time for humanity to organize a proper response. But most of all, they needed the galaxy to understand what was really happening here. "Rachel, can you access the galactic communication networks?" Laura asked. "The satellites have that capability, yes. But it has been 300 years. I don't know if our protocols are still compatible. Try anyway. We need to tell our story before this escalates further." Rachel worked at her console for several minutes, her fingers flying across the controls. Finally, she looked up with surprise. "I'm in. The basic communication standards have not changed that much. I can broadcast to the entire galactic network." Laura took a deep breath. "Record this message. Make sure it reaches every world in the council." She waited for Rachel's signal, then began speaking. Her voice was calm but firm. "My name is Dr. Laura Hayes. I am a human being from the planet Earth. 300 years ago, my species made a difficult choice. We discovered something troubling about ourselves. We are very good at war. Too good. We recognize patterns faster than other species. We adapt to threats with frightening efficiency. We never stop, never quit, never accept defeat when our survival is at stake." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "We looked at ourselves honestly and did not like what we saw. We had developed weapons that could destroy our world. We had fought wars that killed millions. And we were getting better at it with each generation. So we made a choice. We would remove ourselves from the galaxy. Not because we were weak. Not because we were afraid of others. But because we were afraid of what we might become if we stayed." Laura activated the holographic display, pulling up historical records from humanity's archives. Images appeared in the air above her, recordings from 300 years ago. "These are the records of our final wars before the Great Sleep. Watch carefully. See how quickly we adapted. See how efficiently we fought. This is what we chose to walk away from. The footage showed battles fought with precision and terrible effectiveness. Human soldiers moving in coordinated patterns, anticipating enemy movements, adapting tactics on the fly. Command centers where officers analyzed data and made decisions in seconds that would take other species minutes or hours. Weapons systems that learned from each engagement and became more accurate with every shot. We entered stasis voluntarily, Laura continued. We asked the Galactic Council of that time to leave us alone. To let us sleep while the galaxy grew and developed without our interference. Treaties were signed. Promises were made. And for 300 years, those promises were kept. She gestured toward the display showing Kane's fleet in orbit. Now someone has broken those promises. They came to our system without permission. They ignored our warnings. And when we defended ourselves without causing a single casualty, they responded with military force. We did not want to wake up. We chose peace. But you have forced our hand. Rachel was monitoring the transmission. It's broadcasting across the entire network. Thousands of worlds are receiving it. On the Galactic Council homeworld, Nina Ross sat in her small office watching Laura's broadcast. She had been following the situation in the Sol system with growing concern. Now she watched as the human woman explained what her people had done and why. Nina felt vindicated but also terrified. She had been right about the warnings, but being right brought her no comfort. Around the galaxy, billions of beings watched the same broadcast. They saw the historical footage of human warfare. They heard Laura's explanation. And they began to understand what had been sleeping in the Sol system for 300 years. High above Earth, Kane's military fleet moved into attack positions. He had seen the broadcast too, but he dismissed it as propaganda. Ancient history meant nothing. He had force on his side and he intended to use it. All ships, prepare to enter atmosphere, Kane ordered. Destroy any defense platforms that target us. We are taking control of this planet. The warships began their descent, breaking through Earth's outer atmosphere with trails of fire. Across the planet below, millions of defense systems that had waited silently for 3 centuries suddenly activated. Satellites adjusted their positions. Orbital platforms armed their weapons. Ground-based installations powered up for the first time in 300 years. Laura watched the tactical display as Kane's fleet descended. Her hands were shaking but her voice remained steady. Computer, authorize full defensive response. Protect all stasis facilities. Minimize casualties on both sides if possible. Acknowledged, the computer replied. Engaging targets. The battle for Earth was about to begin. The Earth defense grid came online with a speed that surprised even Laura Hayes. 300 years of dormancy meant nothing to systems designed by humanity's best engineers. Within seconds, every satellite, every platform, every automated defense station achieved full operational status. The network linked together seamlessly, sharing data and coordinating responses with the kind of efficiency that only human-designed systems could achieve. Kane's warships descended through the atmosphere in attack formation. Their weapons were locked on the defense satellites, targeting systems acquiring hundreds of potential threats. On the flagship bridge, Kane stood with his arms crossed, watching the tactical display with grim satisfaction. Fire at will, he commanded. Destroy anything that moves. The first volley came from Kane's fleet. Missiles streaked toward the nearest satellites while energy beams lanced through the air toward ground installations. It was an impressive display of firepower, the kind that had pacified a dozen worlds for Kane's mining operations. But the defense grid did not respond the way Kane expected. In the Mountain Research Facility Command Center, Laura watched as the artificial intelligence running Earth's defenses analyzed the incoming attack in microseconds. The AI had been trained on every military conflict in human history, every battle, every tactical innovation, every hard-learned lesson from 300 years of warfare. It had studied how humans fought and why they won. Now it put that knowledge to use. The satellites moved. Not with the slow, predictable patterns of normal orbital mechanics, but with sudden bursts of acceleration that should have been impossible for objects their size. They dodged the incoming missiles with precision, weaving through the attack like dancers avoiding raindrops. Ground-based defense platforms activated next. Counter-missiles launched from hidden silos, intercepting Kane's weapons in mid-flight. Energy shields flickered to life around critical facilities, absorbing beam weapons that would have caused massive damage. Tom Chin stared at the tactical display in amazement. I have never seen defensive systems move like that. Human engineering, Rachel Foster said quietly. We design these systems to think like we do. To adapt and improvise. The AI controlling the defense grid completed its analysis of Kane's fleet. It identified weak points in each ship's design. It calculated optimal firing solutions. It determined exactly how much force would be needed to disable each vessel without destroying it or harming the crew. And then it acted. A satellite positioned above Kane's flagship rotated smoothly and fired a single pulse of energy. The beam struck the warship's main reactor housing with perfect precision, not penetrating the core but disrupting the magnetic containment fields. The reactor automatically shut down to prevent a catastrophic failure. Every system on the flagship went dark. What happened? Kane shouted as emergency lighting flickered on. Engineering report. Reactor offline, sir. The containment fields collapsed. We have to run full diagnostics before we can restart. It will take hours. Before Kane could respond, his second-in-command's ship went dark. Then his third. The defense grid was working through his fleet methodically, disabling one ship after another with the same surgical precision. In orbit above Asia, 3 warships attempted to concentrate their fire on a single satellite. The satellite detected the coordinated attack pattern and responded by transmitting its tactical data to 6 neighboring platforms. Within a second, all 7 satellites moved in perfect synchronization, creating overlapping fields of fire that no ship could avoid. 3 energy beams struck 3 different warships simultaneously, each one hitting the exact same weak point in their reactor housings. The warships tried to retreat, climbing back toward space where they would have more room to maneuver. But the defense grid anticipated the movement. Satellites that had been positioned for exactly this contingency activated and moved to intercept. There was no escape route that the AI had not already calculated and blocked. A squadron of fighter craft launched from one of the remaining active warships, hoping their smaller size and greater speed would overwhelm the defenses. 40 fighters scattered in all directions, each one piloted by an experienced combat veteran. The defense grid tracked all 40 craft simultaneously. It calculated their trajectories, predicted their evasive maneuvers, and determined the most efficient response. Small orbital platforms, barely larger than the fighters themselves, activated and moved to engage. What followed was a display of coordination that left the fighter pilots stunned. Every time a pilot tried to line up a shot, a defense platform was already moving out of the way. Every evasive maneuver the fighters attempted was predicted and countered. Within minutes, all 40 fighters had been hit with electromagnetic pulse weapons that fried their electronics without harming the pilots. The disabled craft drifted helplessly, their life support systems still functioning but their weapons and engines completely dead. Automated rescue drones launched from Earth's surface immediately. They moved through space with the same precise efficiency as the defense platforms, attaching themselves to each disabled fighter and stabilizing life support systems. No pilot would be allowed to die from oxygen depletion or system failures. Laura watched the tactical display with mixed feelings. Pride at how well the defense systems were working. Horror at what those systems represented. This was humanity's talent on full display, the ability to wage war with terrifying efficiency. This was exactly what they had tried to leave behind 300 years ago. How long has the engagement lasted? She asked. 31 minutes, Tom replied. 19 ships disabled so far. 1 remaining vessel is attempting to flee the system. The last warship was burning its engines at maximum thrust, trying to reach the safety of deep space. But 3 satellites moved to intercept, positioning themselves along its escape route. The warship's captain saw them coming and made a desperate decision. He shut down all offensive systems and broadcast a surrender signal. The satellites held their fire. The warship was allowed to continue its flight, though its weapons remained offline thanks to the electromagnetic pulse that struck it moments later. Engagement complete, the AI announced. All hostile vessels disabled or retreating. 0 casualties on either side. Rescue operations in progress. 47 minutes. That was how long it had taken for Earth's defense grid to completely neutralize a military force of 20 warships and 40 fighters. 47 minutes to demonstrate 300 years of technological advancement and the tactical brilliance that humanity had chosen to leave behind. Laura stood and walked to the communications console. Rachel, open a channel to the Galactic Council. Make sure every member world receives this transmission. Rachel worked quickly. Channel open. You are broadcasting to the entire Council network. Laura took a deep breath and spoke clearly. Members of the Galactic Council, I am Dr. Laura Hayes speaking from Earth. You have just witnessed what happened when military force was used against our world. 20 warships came to our system and opened fire on our defenses. In 47 minutes, all of them were disabled. Not destroyed. Disabled. We could have killed everyone aboard those vessels. We chose not to. She paused, letting her words sink in. 300 years ago we chose peace. We recognized that we were too good at war, too efficient at violence. We removed ourselves from the galaxy to protect everyone, including ourselves. We did not want this awakening. We wanted to sleep until we had changed, until we had evolved past our violent nature. But you did not honor the treaties. You came to our world uninvited. You ignored our warnings. And when we defended ourselves without killing anyone, you responded with military force. Laura's voice grew harder. You have forced our hand. 8 billion humans are now waking from stasis. We did not want this. We chose peace 300 years ago. But you would not let us have peace. Now you will deal with the consequences of your choices. Across the galaxy, billions watched the broadcast in silence. They had seen the footage of the battle. They had watched human defense systems operate with a precision and efficiency that no other species could match. The truth was now clear to everyone. Humanity had not fled the galaxy in fear. They had stepped aside voluntarily, and now they had been forced to step back. On his darkened flagship, Kane sat in his command chair and stared at nothing. His fleet was disabled. His investment was ruined. And he had awakened something that the galaxy had been safer with sleeping. The stasis facilities across Earth hummed with activity as revival protocols engaged in every continent. In the Arctic facility beneath ancient ice sheets, 10 million people began the slow process of waking. In the African complex hidden under the Sahara Desert, another 15 million started their journey back to consciousness. Facility after facility came online, each one processing thousands of individuals every hour. Laura Hayes stood at the command center window looking out over the Rocky Mountains. The view had not changed in 300 years. The same peaks, the same valleys, the same forests. But everything else had changed. Humanity had been forced awake, and now they had to figure out what to do next. Dr. Hayes, we have an incoming transmission, Rachel Foster called from her console. It's from the Galactic Council. The sender identifies herself as Nina Ross. Laura turned from the window. Put her through. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the young Threxian diplomat. Nina looked tired but determined. She spoke quickly, her words tumbling over each other. Dr. Hayes, my name is Nina Ross. I tried to warn the Council about your world. I tried to stop this before it started. I am so sorry that I failed. Laura studied the alien woman's face. She could see genuine regret there and something else. Hope, perhaps. It is not your fault, Laura said gently. You tried. That matters. Nina nodded gratefully. The Council is in chaos right now. Some members want to send more military forces. Others want to quarantine your entire system. A few are even talking about using weapons that could sterilize your planet. She paused, her expression darkening. But most of them are simply terrified. They watched what your defenses did to Kane's fleet. They do not understand how you could be so precise, so efficient. Because we have had 300 years to think about it, Laura replied. 300 years to regret our nature and try to find better ways. I want to help, Nina said earnestly. I want to prevent this from escalating into something worse. Will you work with me? Will you help me convince the Council that humanity can be trusted? Laura glanced at Tom and Rachel. They both nodded. She turned back to Nina. Yes, we will work with you. But understand this. We will not be pushed around. We will not be threatened. We chose peace once. We can choose it again. But only if the galaxy gives us a real chance. Over the next 3 weeks, Nina worked tirelessly to arrange meetings between human representatives and council members. Many delegates refused to even consider talking. They wanted humanity sealed away, contained, or worse. But Nina was persistent, and slowly she began to change minds. The breakthrough came when Laura made a proposal that surprised everyone. Humanity would share what they had learned during their 300 years in virtual space. While we slept, our minds were active, Laura explained to the council assembly via holographic transmission. We existed in virtual environments where we could conduct research without physical limitations. Time moved differently there. What felt like years to us was only days in the real world. We made advances in science and technology that would have taken centuries in normal space. She activated a data display showing medical research. We have cures for diseases that plague your worlds. Cancer, genetic disorders, neural degeneration. We solved these problems in our virtual laboratories. The council members leaned forward with interest. Disease was universal. Every species suffered from illness. Laura continued. We also developed clean energy systems that can power entire cities without pollution or resource depletion. Fusion reactors small enough to fit in a building but powerful enough to supply millions of homes. We will share these designs freely. A Keltheran delegate spoke up. Why would you give us such valuable technology? You could use it as leverage. Because we do not want leverage, Laura said firmly. We want peace. We want to show you that we are not monsters. We are scientists, doctors, engineers, artists. We are people who made a mistake 300 years ago and spent all that time trying to make up for it. Nina watched from her position in the chamber as the mood shifted. The council members were still wary, but curiosity was replacing fear. Greed was replacing caution. The technology humanity offered was worth more than all of Kane's mining operations combined. The negotiations took weeks. Humanity would be allowed to rejoin the galactic community, but with conditions. They would share their technology openly. They would limit their military capabilities to defensive systems only. They would accept council observers to verify compliance with the treaties. In return, the galaxy would honor the original promises. Earth's system would remain human territory. No mining, no exploitation, no interference without permission. Kane's fate was decided swiftly. His company was dissolved, its assets ceased to pay for the damages he had caused. Kane himself was prosecuted under galactic law for violating protected space and unauthorized military action. He would spend the next 50 years in a council prison facility. Nina was appointed as the official ambassador to Earth, the first alien to hold such a position in 300 years. She moved to a small apartment in what had once been called New York, learning to navigate a world that was both ancient and newly awakened. 6 months after the crisis began, Laura stood on the observation deck of the Mountain Research Facility with her team. Tom Chin stood to her left, Rachel Foster to her right. They watched the night sky together, seeing stars that had been visible to their ancestors 300 years ago. Do you think we made the right choice? Tom asked quietly. Sharing everything we learned? Laura considered the question. I think we made the only choice that gives us a chance. We could have kept our technology secret, used it to make ourselves powerful. But that would have made everyone fear us even more. This way we show them who we really are. We are still the same species that scared ourselves into sleeping for 300 years, Rachel pointed out. That has not changed. No, Laura agreed. But maybe we have learned something. Maybe we can be what we are without becoming what we feared. A shooting star streaked across the sky above them. Tom smiled. Probably one of the new satellites going up. The council observation platforms. Let them watch, Laura said. We have nothing to hide anymore. Down on the surface, in the cities that were slowly coming back to life, 8 billion humans were learning to live in a galaxy that had moved on without them. Some found work helping other species implement the new technologies. Others became traders, explorers, artists. A few joined the council's scientific programs, eager to learn what had been discovered during humanity's long sleep. The final treaty was signed in a ceremony attended by representatives from every council world. The document was long and detailed, covering everything from trade agreements to military limitations. But the last clause was simple and direct, written at Nina's insistence. Never mistake patience for weakness. It became known across the galaxy as the human clause. A reminder of what had happened when someone made that very mistake. A warning to future generations about the species that had chosen peace but never forgotten how to fight. Laura attended the signing ceremony via holographic transmission. When it was over and the delegates began filing out, Nina stayed behind and approached Laura's projection. Thank you, Nina said, for giving us a chance. For not becoming what everyone feared. Laura smiled. Thank you for believing we could be better. For fighting for us when no one else would. What will you do now? Nina asked. Laura looked out at the stars visible through the chamber windows. Learn. Try to be worthy of the peace we chose 300 years ago. And hope that this time we get it right. The projection faded, leaving Nina alone in the empty chamber. She looked at the treaty document on the table, at the signatures from 100 worlds. At the bottom, in human script, was the new galactic law. Never mistake patience for weakness. Nina smiled. Humanity was awake now, and the galaxy would have to learn to live with them. But perhaps, with time and effort, they would learn to live together. Perhaps 300 years of patience had earned humanity the right to try again. She turned and walked toward the exit, ready to begin her work as ambassador to a species that had terrified the galaxy simply by defending themselves. It would not be easy. But nothing worthwhile ever was. Above Earth, the stars shone as they always had, eternal and unchanged. But below them everything had changed. Humanity had awakened, not to conquer or dominate, but to find their place in a galaxy that had finally learned to respect them. And in that respect, fragile as it was, lay the hope for a better future.